Yes, this episode of Kenshin was straight up fire. I don't care. I don't care what anybody says. Call me a fanboy. Call me whatever you want to. I don't really care. I think this was the best episode of the new anime so far. And I know I've said that like 2 or 3 times, but granted, there's only 12 episodes. So at some point, one episode is always going to be better than the other. This might be the peak, though, unless we get to later in the season at like the finale, if we get Saito introduced. That might become my favorite, but I legitimately think this is going to be the best episode, if not the next one as well, because it's kind of the conclusion of what's going to be happening here. But I was saying in the last video that they could take it either one or 2 ways. They could have one more episode in this sort of like Aoshi Oniwaban segment, or they could stretch it out into 2. And I think they're making the correct decision by stretching it out into 2, because the finale of this, as you're probably already getting the impression of, again, I don't want to spoil it for new Kenshin fans, but this is going to be pretty intense, and it would have been a lot to add in the fight between Kenshin and Aoshi and the finale of this segment of the arc in the same episode, and you want to give enough time for both. So I'm glad that they did. The fight between Kenshin and Aoshi I thought was very, very well done. And actually, even compared to the 90s version, I think that this version did a little bit better overall, just kind of showing the scope of it, other than like 1 or 2 little things. And of course, obviously just preferring the older style. But as far as like the process of showing each individual segment of the fight, going through all of the different techniques and ideas and fighting strategy that is happening here, because this is in a way where Kenshin thrives. It thrives on the thematics and the ideas and themes of redemption and Kenshin trying to be a wanderer, giving up, killing, his vow to not kill and everything, and how he inspires people around him, and the idea of, what good can you do by continuing to live even if you've made horrible decisions in the past? All of these themes are very, very prevalent and very important. But I think also, as far as like the battle shonen aspect of Kenshin, it really, really thrives in its explanations and exaggerations of how the fight scenes tend to go. A lot of the fighting segments in Kenshin are only done in a couple of different moves. Like, it's about 3 or 4 interactions back and forth before a fight is over, but time is usually kind of slowed down for us. It explains to us how the techniques work, what the characters are actually doing, what's going on in their heads. Like, the action that we're watching is taking place over the course of like 2 to 3 seconds, but we're kind of like in that sort of like that calm state of like time slowing down and the characters trying to understand what each other are doing. And I think that this episode really exemplified that and really, really showcased it in a fantastic way, because you have Aoshi here, who is a guy that can stand up to Kenshin, who can basically like fight on Kenshin's level, even though I would say Kenshin is a little bit more skilled at this point in the series. Aoshi is one of those guys that can at least, cause some significant damage against Kenshin. And I love this process of discovery of who Aoshi is during the course of this fight, how he only pulls out one weapon, which seems like a short sword. It seems like a wakizashi, but it's a specific weapon called a kodachi. Now, I don't really know too much about like the martial weapons as far as that goes. Like, I know what a katana is, obviously. I know what a wakizashi is. I don't really know much about the kodachi, but it is something that really interests me in the character. And one thing I love about Kenshin as a series is that every main character has a very specific signature weapon that they use. Like, no 2 characters really use the same weapons, even though we're dealing in a world of like samurai and swordsmanship, and you think every character would have a katana, but every character is a little bit different, because Kenshin has, a reverse bladed sword. It's a dull sword. Aoshi has his kodachi. Sanosuke fights with his fists. Yahiko has a wooden sword. Kaoru has a wooden sword. We'll encounter other characters that have another variety of weapons. Hanya in the last episode, he uses Kenpo, the metal gloves, the Wolverine claws, he's got all these different things. So one thing that I really appreciate the series does is to give every character their own signature weapon and their own signature fighting style. And Aoshi's the kodachi. And what Kenshin notices right away is that it's very good for defense because of its size, but also Aoshi incorporates his techniques with the kodachi, like the defensiveness techniques, along with the offensive techniques of Kenpo, which is what he taught Hanya. So the entire last episode where he's fighting Hanya, who's like this Kenpo master, well, Hanya actually learned it from Aoshi. So you see like all of these different levels of Aoshi kind of coming out during the battle, along with his signature technique, which is the Kaiten Kembu, right? And it's the one where he sort of has these after images kind of going around. And in the 90s anime, they depicted this in a pretty basic way, pretty much how you would see an after image displayed in almost any anime, where it's like just like 5 different images of the same character kind of moving across the screen. I really, really, really dug how this anime tackled that instead, where it kind of like made the background go completely dark, and we're kind of in Kenshin's headspace, and Aoshi is moving around him almost like a dance. It's not just Aoshi standing still kind of moving around. It's almost as if like he's swirling, he's flowing, and he even makes notice of it kind of being like water, right? Which is like Eastern philosophy techniques of being able to flow with the energy itself, and being able to kind of turn yourself into water. Like Bruce Lee always says, you know, be like water, be adaptable. And it felt more, I don't know, it felt more like spiritual because of that. Like it felt more sort of like an actual swordsmanship technique rather than just an anime, you know, standard, you know, after image thing. And with the fight, it also shows like the resourcefulness of Kenshin, how Aoshi kind of attacks, you know, very, very quickly, something that would have killed him. But in the last moment, Kenshin is able to like pull the sheath up to take some of the force out of the attack, which shows, number one, how strong Aoshi's attack is, that it can cut right through like the steel of his sheath, but also Kenshin's just very quick reaction time, his quick resourcefulness. And it gives you the idea of how Kenshin fought during the war when he needed to, because he was going to come up against a lot of strong opponents over and over again, and he's just so quick with his resourcefulness. He's so quick to figure out the faults and other techniques and the right time to strike. Just like when he grabs his sword to make it a little bit shorter to match the Kodachi. It's just like these things that Kenshin does. You know, it's not a fluke. Like, this guy is a master. And the thing about Kenshin is, like, a lot of different shonen, a lot of different anime begin their story with their character being a novice and having to learn and grow and all that. But Kenshin starts his journey out after he's already been through it, after he's already been through the war. And we're watching slowly as we introduce more, you know, stronger, more competent characters for Kenshin to fight. We're introducing more of who Kenshin really is and how Kenshin really fights with his resourcefulness. I also love the moment where Kenshin finds like the counter strike moment, and he blocks the blade, hits Aoshi in the throat, and then Aoshi throws that left hook at the last moment. And it just, physics-wise, it makes perfect sense, because he was hit in the throat, and he had to throw that hook, which caused him to need to inhale a lot of air, which caused him to pass out. Makes perfect sense, at least for me. And, you know, I dig that. I dig that kind of stuff. I dig the sort of explanation of the fighting styles and how these things work. And I think Kenshin is really, really good at doing that. But as awesome as the fight is itself, we are also getting more analysis of who Aoshi is as a person. And as I was talking about in the last review, how all of these Oniwaban characters have very specific, very unique skill sets that can't really be put to use in a kind of modern day circumstance. Like, these guys are sort of like, in a way, slaves to who they were before. They are designed specifically, like, either body type wise, or what Hanya's done, or where Shikujo comes from, what he did. Like, they don't have any kind of use in society, right? And Aoshi values and cares about his team so much. And you know, Kenshin asks him, you know, you must have had approaches from officials or like people in the government, or people saying, you know, that wanted you to have some sort of high position. Like, why did you end up working for this fucking drug dealer, Kanryu, right? And Aoshi's like, you're right. You know, I did get offered all of these positions. I did get a chance to go on and do something, but he refused to do it because he couldn't take his friends with him. And that right there, I think, tells you everything that you need to know about Aoshi. He could have had it all. Like, look, he's the leader of the Oniwaban group. He's the strongest one that they have. He became the leader when he was 15. Okay, like, he's got, for himself, he has nothing to prove. But for his friends, for the Oniwaban group, for their reputation, he feels like he has everything to prove. Because in the war, they never got a chance to fight. They never got a chance to put their name out there. They never had a chance to prove themselves. They never had a chance to win, right? And so now he's put up against Kenshin. And it's not even about Kenshin. It's like Kenshin represents the strongest of the imperialists. So if Aoshi could defeat him, it would be the reputation not for Aoshi, but the reputation for the Oniwaban group. He would give the credit to everybody. He wouldn't just take the credit for himself. He would give it to Hanya and Shikujo and all of the other characters. And that's who Aoshi is as a person. He is not going to take some sort of deal from the government. He's not going to take a buyout if he can't bring his friends along with him. And for him to stick his neck out, you know, for them like that, and even if they have to wind up taking jobs from a shitty person like Conryu, you know, he wants them to get some use out of themselves, out of their skill sets, of what they can do, because the world has moved on and there is no use for them. But Aoshi will never let go of his friendships, and that's the point. But all of that seems to not matter at the end of the episode, where Conryu, you know, spouts nothing to do with honor, nothing to do with friendship, nothing to do with loyalty, and just pulls out the Gatling gun, which again plays into the time period that we're talking about in Kenshin, and how after the war, the borders were opened up more. There was more trading from other places in the world, and they were gaining more equipment like this. And more devastating, destructive weapons. And the Gatling gun, of course, is like, you know, one of the worst at the time, I would say. Now, there's a whole climactic segment that's going to happen here that I don't want to spoil, but it begins here with Conryu firing, Aoshi getting his legs taken out. You know, he falls to the ground helpless. They're in this big open room. And, you know, Conryu is just going to take out Aoshi. He's going to take out everybody. Aoshi, Kenshin, the Oniwaban. He's just like, fuck all of you guys. You know, I will show you that I will win everything with money, essentially. And he goes to finish the job on Aoshi, and the episode ends right with Shikijo getting in front of him and guarding him with his body being taken down, which I think was a great cliffhanger. And there's so much I want to say about what's about to happen, but I will leave that for the next episode. But until then, I really do think that this is one of the best episodes that have come out in the new anime. Oh, so yeah, I forgot to say, if you're following along in the manga, this adapts chapters 26, 27, and a little bit of 28. It actually doesn't go up until the end of a chapter, so it's kind of in the middle of chapter 28 right now. But that's where we are. So next episode will definitely finish the Oniwaban segment of this arc. That's not to say there's not more Oniwaban stuff to come in the future. You know, I don't want to spoil anything, but I'm just saying, like, if you love this kind of thing, like, don't worry. That's all I'm going to say. So next episode, we'll finish that. Episode after that, I already know exactly what it's going to be. You know, should be a fun one, you know, kind of a lesser stakes one. And then we're going to get into another segment with another sort of big bad. And I think that the season will end. Again, if you don't know who I'm talking about, this doesn't matter, but I think the season will end with the introduction of Saito, which will begin the Kyoto arc, which is my favorite arc in the whole manga, and one of the best shonen arcs of all time, in my opinion. So we have that to look forward to. Anyways, guys, tell me what you thought about this episode of Kenshin. Did you like it? Did you not like it? How do you think it compares to the 90s version? If you are new to Kenshin, or if you're an anime only, how did you feel about this episode? How did you feel about the fight? How did you feel about learning more about Aoshi? And where do you think the climax is going to take us? So thanks for watching, guys. I do appreciate it. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and a comment to help it out in the algorithm. As I've said, you know, the Kenshin reviews don't really do that great, but I'm going to keep doing them regardless. But if you want to help give them a little bit of a push, go ahead and give a comment and like. I'd really appreciate it. Other than that, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.